Welcome back to Screen Scan. Today, we're diving into the 2000 film Unbreakable. David Dunn, Bruce Willis, survives a devastating train crash with no injuries. He meets comic book dealer Elijah Price, Samuel L. Jackson, who believes David has superhuman abilities. As David discovers his true potential, a darker secret about Elijah emerges. Let's explore how this story unfolds. The story opens with David Dunn, a tired, ordinary man, seated on a train speeding through the countryside. His face is a mask of quiet resignation, eyes dull and weary. David is traveling home to Philadelphia after a job interview in New York. He's alone in his thoughts, his emotions guarded, but we can see the tension in him, a tension that seems to follow him everywhere. As the train rumbles along, a woman sits down beside David. He slides his wedding ring off, hiding it from view. The two try to make a small talk. Later on, the woman said she's married. Their interest shifts with an awkward movement. The air is uncomfortable, and David tries to start conversation. It's forced like someone going through the motions, but it goes nowhere. The woman's polite smile fades, and she moves to another seat. David watches her go, a deep sadness in his eyes. It can feel that something is broken in his life. The calm has been disrupted out of nowhere. The train makes a sharp jolt. It feels like everything is falling apart all around him. The train suddenly drifts off the tracks in a terrifying derailment as the passengers cry out and the metal screams. Chaos erupts in every situation. Later, David awakens in a hospital, confused and disoriented. A doctor enters, looking at him in astonishment. David is the sole survivor of the train wreck. Not only that, he doesn't have a single scratch on him. The doctor explains that there were 131 passengers, and every one of them died except for him. The scene lingers as David tries to process this news. He looks at his hands and at his body, wondering how this is possible. He's alive, but he can't explain why. His wife, Audrey, picks him up from the hospital. Their marriage is on the rocks. There's a palpable distance between them, an unspoken rift. Their interactions are strained, as if they're holding back from saying what really needs to be said. The train accident has shaken David, but he doesn't share the full depth of his thoughts with Audrey. There's something deeply personal, almost spiritual, about his survival, and it leaves him with questions that he doesn't know how to answer. Then, something unusual happens. Once David had left the funeral, a ceremony remembering each and every train wreck victim was held. David gets a small card with a message on it, but it fails to specify who gave it. Back at work, David tries to return to normal. He's a security guard at a stadium, a job that seems to fit his quiet, watchful personality. But his routine feels empty, and he's haunted by a nagging sense that something feels different. The people around him talk about the crash with awe, how it's a miracle anyone survived. David, though, does not consider himself a miracle. He feels shaken by the train crash in ways he cannot fully put into words. He feels confused, isolated by the inexplicability of his survival. He begins to question things he's never questioned before. He went to Audrey and asked her, "Do you remember me getting sick?" But Audrey cannot give him a specific answer. There is a man named Elijah Price. Elijah owns a gallery that specializes in comic book art. David, curious but cautious, goes to Elijah's gallery and discovers that he is the one who handed him the small card. When he arrives, he's greeted by a man unlike anyone he's ever met. Elijah is charismatic and mysterious, but there's something fragile about him. As they talk, Elijah reveals that he suffers from a rare condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, which makes his bones incredibly brittle, so brittle that they break easily, earning him the nickname Mr. Glass. Elijah has spent his life in pain, surrounded by the constant threat of injury. But Elijah's condition has given him a unique perspective. He spent his entire life obsessing over the world of comic books, particularly the myth of superheroes. He believes that if someone like him, so fragile and weak, can exist, then there must be someone on the other end of the spectrum, someone who is strong, unbreakable. Elijah hints that he believes David might be this person. He's convinced that David's survival from the train wreck isn't just a coincidence. It's proof of something extraordinary. Elijah urges David to think back on his life, to really consider the possibility that he's not like other people. David is skeptical, even disturbed by Elijah's obsession with comic book mythology. He insists that he's just a normal man, nothing more. Elijah, however, isn't deterred. He presses David to think about his life. Has David ever been sick? Injured? As Elijah's words sink in, David begins to realize something unsettling. He can't remember ever being seriously hurt. He recalls playing football in college, enduring physical challenges but never being injured. The memory of the train crash looms large, and David starts to wonder, could Elijah be right? David tries to brush off the conversation, but Elijah's theory sticks with him. As the days pass, David becomes increasingly aware of his body, his senses, his strength. One day, David was strolling past a man dressed in camouflage at the stadium where he was standing watch. David notices that the man is hiding a gun. The armed man seemed to have left spontaneously because he felt that David was observing him, even if he did nothing. David seems to possess an enhanced perception of danger, similar to a sixth sense. Disturbed by these new sensations, David shares his concerns with his son, Joseph. Joseph idolizes his father and is fascinated by Elijah's theory. Joseph, young and impressionable, begins to believe that his father is a superhero, someone destined to protect others. This belief takes hold in Joseph's mind, leading to a tense moment when he finds his father lifting weights in their basement. Joseph watches in awe as David effortlessly lifts far more than he should be able to. Joseph, with a look of wonder, keeps adding more weight, pushing David to test his limits. David, too, is surprised by his strength. He can lift hundreds of pounds without breaking a sweat. As David begins to grapple with the unsettling truth that he might be more than just a man, the memories of his past start to surface. After that, David receives a call that Joseph was hurt in play rehearsal at school and needs him. Shortly after that, he unexpectedly runs into an elderly woman who recognizes him. As the woman talks to him, her eyes sharp with recollection. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asks, her voice soft but firm, filled with the weight of years gone by. David hesitates to answer, unsure where this is leading. In their conversation, the woman shares a key piece of his past that David had nearly forgotten. When he was a young boy, he almost drowned in a swimming pool. The woman vividly recalls how David was found at the bottom of the pool and had to be pulled out. Though David survived the incident, the memory of his near drowning has lingered in the minds of those who knew him back then. This revelation, coming from a stranger who witnessed his past, strikes David deeply. He begins to realize that his survival from the pool as a child, much like the train crash, wasn't just luck. It was part of something larger, a pattern he's only now beginning to understand. Water has always been his one weakness, and this childhood trauma had been an early sign of that. His mind races as he starts piecing together the moments in his life where he should have been hurt, should have been broken, but wasn't. The revelation of his strength brings David closer to the truth, but it also deepens his confusion. What does it mean to be unbreakable? As Joseph's belief grows, David becomes increasingly troubled. Then, the tension between them escalates into a terrifying moment. Joseph, desperate to prove that his father is invincible, points a loaded gun at him. It's an unbearable scene, as Joseph is convinced the bullet won't hurt David. But David is terrified. He pleads with his son, telling him that he's just an ordinary man, that he can be hurt like anyone else. The fear in David's voice is palpable, but Joseph's faith is unshakable. Finally, after a long and agonizing pause, Joseph lowers the gun, breaking into tears. The emotional intensity of the moment is overwhelming. Joseph believes his father is a hero, but David is still wrestling with the truth about who he is. David is forced to confront his past. He reflects on his life, on moments that now seem pivotal. He remembers a car accident from his youth, an accident that nearly ended his football career. At the time, he claimed to have been injured, which led to him quitting football and living a more ordinary life. But now, David realizes the truth. He wasn't hurt. He faked the injury to stay close to Audrey, abandoning his dream to avoid the risks that came with his abilities. This realization shakes him. He's been hiding from who he truly is for years, suppressing his potential out of fear. Encouraged by Elijah's persistent belief in him, David decides to test his limits further. He follows his instincts, using his heightened senses to guide him. David standing at his usual post as a security guard at the stadium. It's a busy day. Crowds of people are walking by him, moving in and out of the venue. The camera lingers on David's face. He looks uneasy, like he's sensing something is off. He stands tall, scanning the crowd, but it's as though he's not just watching for security threats, he's feeling for them. The atmosphere is tense, underscored by the hum of the crowd, but David seems detached, lost in his thoughts and the sensations moving through him. Suddenly, the hum around him fades, and we see a shift in perspective. David's world slows down, almost like he's entering a trance. A series of brief, vivid flashes hit him, disturbing images that come in quick succession. These aren't his memories. The first image shows a woman was stealing a bracelet from a jewelry shop. The next shows a man violently hitting a woman with a bottle. The next one was a man talking with a drunk woman. David was drawn to the last man when he discovered him attempting to break into the house wherein a deceased man's body was subsequently seen. David follows a man with a sense of urgency, feeling this is the moment his instincts have been preparing him for. As the man disappears into a suburban area, David maintains his distance, knowing something big is about to happen. The quiet streets heighten the tension as the man approaches a particular house, which matches the scenes from his visions. Stopping across the street, David realizes there are people inside in danger, and the man is responsible for the evil he foresaw. With certainty, David knows he's the only one who can stop it. David enters the home, and he found 2 children with their hands tied. After releasing the kids, he looked around the house for the man. And when David found him, he is thrown into a swimming pool, the water engulfing him. He thrashes desperately, panicking as he starts to sink. Water, it seems, is David's one weakness. He nearly drowns, his body betraying him in the face of his greatest fear. But, against all odds, the kids he saved pulls him out of the water. Soaked and gasping for air, he climbs back into the house, determined to save the family. The fight with man continues, and David's strength ultimately wins out. He overpowers the intruder, saving the children from certain death. As he stands in the aftermath, drenched and exhausted, he realizes the truth. Elijah was right. He is different. He is unbreakable. But what does that mean in the real world? David returns home, his mind racing. The next morning, he shares the full story with Joseph, who looks at his father with wide-eyed admiration. David, now fully accepting his role, embraces his abilities not as a superhero from a comic book, but as a protector, someone who can use his gifts to help others in secret. He is not invincible, but he is unbreakable. The bond between father and son is strengthened in this shared understanding. They both now know who David is. But the final, most devastating revelation is still to come. David visits Elijah at his gallery, ready to share what he's learned. Elijah is excited, proud even. He knew all along what David was destined to be. But then, Elijah offered him a shake hands, which made David see those horrible things that Elijah did. With a calm and sinister voice, he confesses to causing the train crash. Not just the train crash, but also multiple other disasters. Fires, plane crashes, bombings, all orchestrated by Elijah in his obsessive search for someone like David. Elijah's logic is cold and twisted. He sees himself as the opposite of David. If David is unbreakable, then Elijah is his necessary counterpart, the villain. David is horrified. Elijah, who seemed to be his mentor, turns out to be a monster. Elijah explains his actions with eerie detachment, seeing himself as a mastermind who had to destroy hundreds of lives to find one man. Elijah smiles as he says, "Now that we know who you are, I know who I am." David is stunned, sickened by the revelation that Elijah, someone he once trusted, is behind the horrific acts he uncovered. Unable to ignore the weight of his discovery, he turns Elijah into the authorities, providing them with the crucial information he has gathered. Investigators swiftly find evidence linking Elijah to 3 acts of terrorism, confirming David's worst fears. As a result, Elijah is arrested and placed in an institution for the criminally insane, where he will face the consequences of his actions. David is left grappling with the betrayal, feeling a mix of relief and guilt as he realizes the magnitude of what he has done to ensure the safety of others. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more exciting content. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.